Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Brian.
And this is our review of A Nightmare on Elm Street, starring Kyle Gallner, Rooney Mara, Katie Cassidy, Thomas Dekker, Kellen Lutz, Clancy Brown, Connie Britton, and Jackie Earle Haley. Directed by Samuel Bayer, released in 2010 on a budget of $35 million, the remake grossed $115 plus at the box office. So, man, I mean, it's 2010, Brian, here. We've got Platinum Dunes all over this thing, New Line, Remake City. I mean, this movie was so anticipated in the horror community. I mean, I remember people talking about it constantly, you know, what's it going to be like? Jackie Earle Haley is the Freddy character. There was a lot of buzz online about it. And I read one little neat point here, and we don't like to read a lot of trivia in here, but I think this is salient for the discussion we're about to have. There were about 15 different drafts of this script, and this film is a hybrid of 4 of them. And I think you can feel that watching it, because there are distinct breaks between what one idea was and when another one came in. And generally, that's not a good sign.
I do want to say and point out that this is the highest grossing Freddy film, theater box office wise, of all of them.
Yeah, if you don't count the Freddy vs. Jason, then yeah, this is the
we
biggest
don't count
one.
That.
So, well, I'm going to argue that we will later. But you know what, though? In percentage-wise, is it? Because that first one was made for like $1.8 million. Yeah, so.
But I could honestly say that this may have been considered a flop in today's standards.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about on I think it was the Part 6 or the Part 7 show, we talked about how these numbers just didn't seem like that big of a deal. And I think we've gotten used to inflated box office numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that's like a weekend now, right?
Yeah, I know. Like if the budget for this is $35 million, that seems kind of paltry, actually. But for a horror movie, I mean,
that's pretty good. Yeah,
that's pretty good. I don't, we've done a lot of these horror remakes and stuff, and they vary in what they cost. I mean, there's definitely some challenges there. I mean, the 2009 Friday the 13th was made for $19 million. Which is a lot of money for a Friday the 13th movie. And if people have, will get to listen to that review, they've heard us talk about how on earth did that, cost that much to make, because it wasn't that
impressive,
outlandish. Well, I don't even want to say the word impressive, but it wasn't that outlandish. I mean, the 2007 Halloween that you and I reviewed was made for $15 million. So $35 million is a lot of money for one of these things, I think. And I think this one, a lot of its budget is spent on the CGI effects that exist in the film. I guess we're going to have to talk about how good or not good those are as we go through it, because there's some definite stuff that looks like they hired the guys from After Last Season to work the sequence.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, maybe they're not that bad, but
nothing's that bad.
They didn't look good in the theater when I saw it, and they haven't looked good in any of the times I've watched this since. This is one of those movies that I keep watching, wanting it and hoping it's going to be better, and every time I feel the same at the end of it. I feel like, why did I just do that? At least it's only 90 minutes or so. It's not that long of a film, but I mean, sheesh, I don't know. It feels every second of its 95-minute runtime. I'll say that.
Yeah,
I think the third act in particular I have problems with, but we'll get there. So.
All right. For me, I didn't see this. I remember watching the previews for it coming out in the theaters and really being excited about it. But I think it took me at least 2 or 3 years before I actually got a copy to watch on this movie. And to say I was disappointed at the time might be an understatement. Especially coming off of, really enjoying watching all the Freddys and being super excited about a new remake version. And there's some good things in this one, but they're far buried, I think, than coming to the forefront.
The thing is about this is that there's so much ground to do something interesting with it, right? I mean, with the modern technology and the whole idea of a dreamscape and all. I mean, there's lots of things we could do with that, right? Because dreams can be, all sorts of stuff. I mean, I don't want to compare this movie to it, but like Inception and some of that stuff. There's even something like What Dreams May Come, which is a weird film about suicide and grief, but it's beautiful to look at. I was expecting, I guess, something like that, and I'm really surprised that for a large part of it, we get kind of a standard boilerplate remake. I mean, if Halloween is a reimagining, if Texas Chainsaw was a reimagining of those properties, this and the Friday the 13th movie, the thing they hold in common is that they were produced by the same group, and they are pretty faithful remakes of what had come before.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do a remake, you either have to go way off script, say Leprechaun Origins.
I don't know if that's the best example.
I think it's a pretty damn good one. Or you have to stick to a very similar construct to the original and make it more updated. And I think that's what they tried to do here. And in a sense, in certain ways, it actually works really well. And in others, it just falls flat.
I agree with you. I think if the inclination was let's try to just update what was there and make it more interesting, I think they had some neat storyline threads going. And again, I go back to the thing I said at the beginning. You can tell when one script idea ends and the next one begins, and they weren't written by the same people necessarily, and they weren't really cohesive. They just made it work. I actually expected when this movie came out in theaters and I saw it, and I said, okay, you know what? They're going to do the whole Ridley Scott thing, and they're going to release like the 2-hour unrated version, when it comes out on DVD. And no, to my knowledge, that doesn't exist. What you see is what the director felt like was all he could possibly shove in there. And I again, we'll go back to the idea that it's 4 of the best 15 scripts kind of shoved together, and there it is. But no, yeah. I did see this, and I remember not being terribly enthralled with what I had seen in theaters. And but like I said, I've just gone back to it several times to try and see, is there something there? And I'll be curious to see what I find in this watching as we get into it. But I think before we go any further, Brian, you got to give people the plot summary. As if you don't know it. I mean, if you've seen any Nightmare on Elm Street films, folks, you know the plot. But we'll do it for consistency's sake nonetheless. So go ahead, Brian.
Nancy, Quentin, Jesse, Chris, and Dean are all haunted in reoccurring nightmares by a burned man with razor knives on his right hand. After Dean dies, Chris and Nancy begin to remember and see evidence that they all knew each other much earlier in life than any of them can remember. After more deaths, Nancy and Quentin uncover the truth. They were all classmates at Bedham Preschool, where a man named Fred Krueger worked as a groundskeeper, and he seemed to be very close to the children. In fact, he abused several of them, especially Nancy, and the parents took matters into their own hands and killed him by burning him up in an act of vigilante justice. Then, through therapy and forced separation, the children were made to forget. Quentin and Nancy wonder if their claims of abuse were even true, but they learn quickly Freddy is after them because they told the truth about the abuse and the parents killed him. Quentin and Nancy decide to take on Freddy in the dream world, and Nancy brings him back to the real world, where she and Quentin seemingly dispatch with him and burn down the remains of the old preschool. Then, in a final coda, Freddy appears behind Nancy's mom in a mirror and kills her in front of Nancy as she screams. Credits roll, and the franchise careens to an abrupt dead end. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, the outcry from the horror fan base after this was, well, where do you go after that? Because first they took a dangling thread that had always been there about Freddy, right? The abuse angle, and they decided to go with that. And instead of doing the most interesting idea they've got, which is the kids made it up, what a twist that would have been, right? they go, no, he really is that creepy. And now you've taken the most memorable thing in your franchise and you've made him so icky that no one could possibly want to root for him. Nobody's costuming is this Freddy. No one wants to be. And this, it's like, I don't want to touch this. It's sort of the way most people acted after, some recent comments about one of our presidential candidates. It's just, you can't touch that goddamn. It's just, no, you don't want to be around that. We're not going to go for that as Halloween anymore. This is, it kind of is a dare I say, sort of a Rob Zombie thing to do. People like to dress up like Michael Myers until they saw that remake and they're like, no, this guy's just pretty effed up. I don't really want to be that. Thanks. So they definitely accomplished one thing. Freddy was not going to be the darn hero anymore. They took care of that quick.
And that was the correct move. I mean, to me, Freddy never should have been the hero. He should always be the bad guy. You should always be rooting against him. And if they have to make him vile like he is supposed to be, then they did the right thing in this movie.
Yeah, they did. But what I'm saying is I don't know how enjoyable of a watching experience that leaves me.
Well, but as a horror film, you should be uncomfortable or scared or something. You should have some emotion against the bad guy. And I think that they accomplished that with this Freddy Krueger version.
You know how I feel about it? I feel about it kind of the way when we started this whole thing back at Last House on the Left. Remember that? Just
unfortunately.
Sort of, just uncomfortable and kind of, I just need to go take a shower now. I just feel dirty having watched it.
It's interesting. I didn't feel that at all. Actually, my thought was this is great. This is a much more sinister Freddy Krueger, and they're actually using the whole child rapist / murderer piece to their advantage here, and I thought that was a good move.
Can we talk about the new Freddy for a little bit? Let's just do that before we get into the story. Jackie Earle Haley. Now, are you familiar with his work at all?
No.
Okay, I knew him from the movie that I guess everybody else knew from. It was called Little Children, and he played a guy that had been a child molester or something like that, and then he got out, and he was still kind of weird, and it was the whole movie is like one of those, horror in suburbia, but not really a horror. It's a drama or whatever. Anyway, he's great in it. He's fantastic in it. Then he played Rorschach in Watchmen, which, I'm not this huge Watchmen fan, so I'm not as angry at that movie as a lot of the fans of that graphic novel are. So I had a good time watching it. He was by far the scariest thing in that movie because all he did was just talk. And he just had this sinister thing. You brought that up. That's a great word for it. Freddy this time is so sinister. And I think they had to do that. And I will credit him for being a good enough actor to pull it off. Because he's small. I mean, he is not nearly as tall as Robert Englund is. And he's not big. I mean, Kellen Lutz, who plays Dean, is like a linebacker. He'd break him in half if he ever really got a hold of him. Now the other two dudes are, sheepish, shrimpish, 2000s douchebags. But no offense to those two actors, but that's just the characters they play. Freddy here this time, though, isn't trying to overpower people. He's diabolical. And the best thing about
he's mind-fucking them.
Well, totally. And the best thing about it to me, Brian, is the little twitch he does with the fingers, the finger knives.
Mm-hmm.
That was something apparently he just came up with. And I thought, well, now, if he brought nothing else to the character except that was genius and brilliant. And apparently that was all him. He just started doing that, and they were like, oh, yeah, do that some more. And then I almost at one point thought, hey, is that too much of that? And I'm like, no, that's cool, and he needs to do that. So I was down for that little moment. But the thing is that all of that are like the tent posts of what you build a good character around. The problem is that the overhang on it is just a tarp. We're missing some walls. There's no floor. All of that is just sort of breezed through in some ways. That's why I felt like when I watched this the first time that there had to be a longer cut of it. And the fact that there's not disappoints me that they didn't go with the story the way they could have.
See, and I have a different point of view on it. I actually think they did a good job of explaining the story in pieces, little bits here and there, and why he's going after Nancy, why this and that. I like the fact that they explained the whole thing as these people are learning it themselves, because the parents weren't going to say anything, right? The mom's not going to tell Nancy what happened. She basically freaks out when she even gets questioned about it. And, to have us learn these things as they are learning them, I thought was a good way to do it. And I actually thought the backstory was really good, having him be kind of one of those trusted people around the preschool or whatever you want to call it, and taking advantage of these little kids, right? And earning their trust by engaging them with their artwork or whatever, right? And then to really go down the rabbit hole with this molestation piece, and then to find out that he's really after Nancy because she was his favorite.
Right?
That's really sinister and disgusting, but that's how it should be to me.
Right.
And I thought they did a good job explaining that, and I really liked the story they told with the parents when they found out and going after him and showing that he gets off on the trial on a technicality, and they took matters in their own hands, chased him down to the school, burned him alive, all this stuff. I think they did a good job with that.
The stuff we've always heard about and have seen pieces of in other Freddy movies, but we get the longest bits of it here. You're right about that. I think what I was wanting from it, Brian, was I wanted more of it. If anybody gets the short shrift in this movie, it's Clancy Brown and Connie Britton, who obviously have like more than they just killed somebody together history that we never get into together. Mm-hmm. Nancy's mom and Quentin's dad, but I wanted more of that. And I think part of that is because I'm older and I know who Clancy Brown and Connie Britton are, and I don't know any of these other people, except from just seeing them on TV here and there and stuff. And I'm interested in them. And I think it would have been a different way of doing it. What if the kids were the side story this time, and it was about the adults and Freddy? And I will say, I do think it would have been a bolder move that if the kids had made it up, and that the overreactive parents.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been a bold move. Now, then you do make Freddy a victim. And that's the thing that's made, Freddy and Jason different than Michael Myers, right? Michael Myers is just a force of evil that just kills people. Sometimes for druid reasons, sometimes not, right? Sometimes just because he's going to kill them. But Freddy and Jason in some way were wronged. At least from their point of view, right? So they are always out getting revenge. And what if they had taken that, revenge angle and actually turned it on its head and said, nope, the kids just made it up and the parents overreacted, and holy cow, this is what we get. That would have been an interesting way to do it.
I think that would have been way cool, an alley to go down. I think that would have been actually really good. But then again, you make Freddy a sympathetic character, and now you're rooting for him to get back at the parents. And I don't think that's what you want to have come out of this. What I did like about what I thought was interesting, I don't want to say I did like, what I thought was interesting about this version is that they never mentioned that he was a child killer in this one, just that he molested the children.
Right, he didn't murder
that was
anybody.
Really interesting, too.
Yeah, it was. And they don't get into the specifics of the technicality or whatever. It's like a warrant wasn't signed or something like that. It's just a drop line. And I guess it's okay. I'm one of those nuts that I love all those like police procedural shows, Criminal Minds and whatnot. And then I watch like 48 Hours and all that stuff and true crime stuff. So I dig that kind of thing. So I guess that's part of me is sort of wanting to know, what would that, the true crime story have been? That would have been neat to hear. But they do spend much more time on it than we ever have before. So I can't knock it too bad. And you're dead on in thinking if we make him that sympathetic, then you are asking the audience then to root for him against people who are not the despicable stereotypes that you root for the killer against. Like that's the thing the Friday the 13th remake did was they took all the despicable stereotypes you hate and just lined them up for Jason to kill for you. Because that's what a Friday the 13th movie is in a lot of ways. But Nightmare on Elm Street became that, but it never really was that. Particularly in its better chapters, there was something there, right? And they also don't have the overtly supernatural part. Like there's no dream demons and there's no churches and none of the Catholic like overtones that were in the first movies and particularly the third and the fourth one. None of that is here.
No, right, and that's probably wise.
Well, I mean, I think too, in a modern audience, I don't still think that plays. One, the church is not a popular subject, in the masses, particularly in 2010, and it's just not something that would play to a modern audience. I don't think they look at things the way that audiences in the 80s did.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think keeping the religion aspect out of it is a good move on their part. I mean, there's just no need to bring that up. You're going to hurt yourself more than anything, especially in this day and age. Whereas back then, maybe it wasn't as big a deal, you know, to bring that into the storyline. To this day and age, you got a lot of people who would be really turned off if you started doing that. So I think it was the right move, and really just keep it on the whole molestation storyline for Freddy Krueger and the school thing and everything else, and just keep the religion aspect out of it and go with he was just a really, really bad dude.
Right. The part of the film that I have the hardest part swallowing, and we're going to get into the whole plot of it here in a minute, but the part of it that I have the hardest part with, Brian, is I don't think they did a good enough job of explaining how they got all of these kids to forget each other. You know, I don't remember everything about, early school years and stuff like that, but I do remember the kids that I played with. And like the other day, like I kid you not, I actually said to myself, I wonder where those two twin brothers that I knew, were that I used to hang out with. And I looked them up on LinkedIn,
Nice.
And I was like, you can find people nowadays. And I'm like, well, we have the way of doing that. I don't know. I guess I needed something, and I never got this sense of, like, was Quentin's dad like a principal, or was he a therapist or whatever? I don't know. Like, I needed to know how they orchestrated this great forgetfulness, because, like we said in the plot summary, I mean, basically they just separated themselves from each other and their kids from each other in what's not that large of a town, but they're all still there, and then they meet again in the high school, and we just hope that none of them ever remember it. But they all do. That's the thing. That's the thing about repressed memories, is that eventually something is going to trigger it. Yes, it is going to get triggered back. You can't hide it forever. And the fact that it's coming out in teenage years makes total sense, because chemicals are changing in your body at a rate that is astronomical at that point. So the kids cannot control all that type of stuff. And I don't know. I needed a better explanation as to how they pulled that off. Did you?
I think it would have been nice to have that explanation. I mean, we can just assume that either they were hypnotized into forgetting, or
hypnosil.
No. Or they went through years of therapy to make them forget, or I'm sure the parents, did something. We're left to just imagine what that might be to do that. Or the kids were so traumatized by it that they repressed the memories themselves.
I don't think they would have. That's the thing is, and you said it, we're left to imagine this, and that's a problem in a film. I can imagine things in a book, and then you tell me 50, 75 pages later, and I'm like, holy cow, I was totally wrong about that. In a movie, you need to show me this at some point, and they never pay that off. And even so, they even back up what, again, I thought would have been a much more interesting idea of Quentin goes off on his dad later and is like, we could have just said anything, and then that goes nowhere. Because, again, that's a script that we took that part of it because we thought it was cool, and then we very quickly reassure everyone, no, he's a molester, he's a molester. So.
Yeah, and they go with that route, right? You said that maybe the kids were all making them up. They tried to go with that route for a little bit, and Nancy and Quentin believing that they made it up before they finally realized that, no, they did not.
I mean, before they go to the preschool, and we get the most uncomfortable bit where they start going through pictures, and, we're going to talk about that when we get to it. But let's get to the opening of the movie here, because this is one thing that I did not expect, and I will give whomever came up with it, whether it was the director, if it was somebody in the studio or whatever, the trailer to this film, when it came out, the long form, and I watched it a lot because I really was just trying to see what they were going to do here, and 80% of the trailer is this opening in the diner here, where we meet Dean and Chris, and basically what happens is Dean falls asleep at the table and takes his steak knife and cuts his own head off. But what happens in the dream, of course, is Freddy is making him do it, but that's what we see. And we talked about, what would you see if you saw somebody being killed by Freddy? What would it look like? Well, now we get an answer to that. And I mean, this is the best scene in the film. It's the best kill in the film, I think, is this opening one, because it just comes out of nowhere. And instead of opening up in a dream, we open up with all of our characters already know what is going on. They're already all having the nightmares, and we see one of them go completely off the rails.
Well, we are in a dream.
He's having dreams in the diner, but that diner scene happens. I mean, he cuts his head off in the diner.
Correct. But he's in the dream when it's going on. I mean, we do open it in the dream, and everything that's happening is part of his dream, and then we kind of tail in and out of it, right? Before we finally see that Freddy's there and doing this to him. But he is technically in a dream, so they keep that part going, which I think is great. It was definitely a great scene, and it was a very promising open. The movie.
I mean, the flashing back and forth between Dream World and Real World and Dream World and Real World, I thought that cinematography and that effect looked amazing. They do it again later on when Nancy's getting attacked in like a CVS by Freddy or whatever. They do that again, and those two times it looks amazing when they go back and forth from Freddy walking down the aisles to shit just flying off the shelves at people, you know. But this diner scene opens up great, and they do the thing that you have to do in these movies. They establish every character we need to know inside of 5 minutes. You know, we get Jesse, who used to date Chris, as if, by the way, and some dude we never see again, and then Quentin, who's crushing hard on waitress Nancy, who works there, and we're going to talk about Rooney Mara in a second, but anyway, there's that, and then you've got Dean, who's obviously freaking out, and he's trying to talk to Chris and tell her, you know, we all knew each other when we were younger, and he can't spit it out. And I do like the fact that he doesn't know how to deal with any of this, and he's just having that complete freak out.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was just a phenomenal scene. And I like the imagery that we get here, and I do like the cutting in and outs between reality and dream world, because you got to try and figure out what's going on and where we are, right? Mm-hmm. And we do get every character, which is always good. I mean, we know who our two main characters are going to be, with Nancy and Quentin, you know, doing the whole googly eye crap.
Okay, did you know that? Because I didn't know that. I actually thought Chris was going to be somebody that got to hang around. I thought they were going to mess with us, as the pretty blonde wasn't going to die.
No, I was pretty. We knew Nancy was the big person, right? The main attraction, and then you got to have her good friend, who's going to be Chris in this situation, get killed. That's just how the nightmares work.
They established that, but again, I thought if they want to do something a little different, maybe they're playing with us here a little bit. Yeah. Can I say something, though, about that? Katie Cassidy, in addition to being very pretty to look at, has a lot of screen presence. Like, she's really good at the whole freak out that happens, because she dies within like 15 minutes. I mean, it's quick.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like Tina in the first
one,
right?
Yeah, I mean, and she doesn't really get to do the comebacks as much as Tina did. I mean, there's one scene, but not as much as, you know, the screw your hall pass and all that stuff. The thing is that she is playing this character in a very believable way. Like, I didn't care for Jesse and Quentin as characters necessarily. I've already kind of berated them. But the actors did a decent enough job with what they had in front of them. I think they were fine. The one that I have the biggest problem with, Brian, is Nancy. Rooney Mara looks like she doesn't want to be there. And from everything I've read and heard from her about it, not personally, but in any press that she would bother to do for this, she hated working on this movie. She didn't want to be in this movie. She didn't get it. She almost quit acting in films because of this. She didn't get along with the director. She didn't like her co-stars. And I think it shows. I think she looks like somebody that does not want to be there. And that's a problem when you're going to lay the movie on her shoulders to carry at one point.
Yeah, and my biggest problem is that you just didn't care about her.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you had no tie to her emotionally for any reason, and you just were like, kind of like, if she dies, big whoop.
I mean, her best scene is when she does have the breakdown at the preschool later after realizing the abuse she suffered. That's harrowing, and it's awful, and she played that right. I think that's the one scene she gave a dang about at all, because the rest of the time she just looks pissed off or bored. And I'm like, that's the wrong impetus. Like, Heather Langenkamp is by no means this master thespian, But I think she understood what she was in, particularly like in part 3. Like part 1, nobody knew what the hell they were doing. They're just trying to make this work, right? And we talked about the dialogue in that movie is horrible, but you go with it because it flows well enough. In part 3, she actually is acting. She's got a character. She's doing things. And, I mean, of course, she was great playing herself in New Nightmare. We both really liked that. But she's doing something. Rooney Mara just looks, like I said, she just looks bored. Like
disinterested, yeah.
Yeah, just not, like, and not the least bit fazed by some of this stuff that's going on around her. And I'm like, I know we have the outgoing extroverted girl, so we want to have the counteract of it, which is the mousy introverted girl, but God, she's just annoying.
Yeah, I agree. She does it's almost she's mailing it home on this one, and you care more about Quentin than you do her, even though she's the one who's been through all the trauma.
Yeah, I see, and there's another opportunity they had. If they really wanted to flip the script on it, Quentin should have been the one that was his favorite. Like, I know they probably couldn't have done that, but you talk about making it even harder to swallow. That would have been interesting because, again, that actor is playing a character. He's doing something because he's strung out on, taking Ritalin or whatever it is he's supposed to be taking. And everybody in this movie is, an insomniac at this point anyway, but he's the one that's doing it with chemicals. Right. So he's like so screwed up, and I liked him from that angle, and they could have had some more fun with that if they wanted to. And they just went back to the boilerplate. It's like that's what I feel about this movie is every time they get up to the precipice of doing something really interesting, then they just stop themselves and they go with the obvious thing.
It's true.
I don't know. I mean, it's a frustrating thing to watch because you can see all the potential in it, but it never comes to fruition. Like, I'm imagining a much more interesting film than I ever see.
I would agree with that. I mean, they did a lot of things good in here, but like you said, it just was like, okay, let's take it to the next step, and then no.
Well, and again,
No.
I blame that on the fact that we're mashing 4 stories together
Scripts,
that
right.
may or may not have been exactly related. I mean, we get right into it. Dean's dead, and we go to his funeral, and we have another, dream in the funeral, and they set up, but then they finally reveal later on in Act 2 that all these kids have stayed awake so long that they're all now like micro napping, which this is apparently a real thing, by the way, that insomniacs suffer. And it's like, this is Freddy's MO though, is that he is actually trying to keep them awake long enough to where when they finally do go to sleep, they go into like a coma. And then he gets to play with them forever, especially Nancy. That's who he wants to, keep that way. And, I don't know. I liked it felt a little fast forwarded, but I won't knock the film for throwing us right into where everybody knew what was going on. Like, they knew the name Fred Krueger. They had all that information. And I know I've listened to and heard other people say, I kind of wish they were figuring it out. Well, we've seen that movie. That was the first one. Kids nowadays, and even in 2010, they'd have been on the internet. They'd have been figuring this stuff out. They would not have been waiting around for somebody to tell them.
Oh, absolutely. I liked it too. I like that the funeral is really what brings them back out of it, which bring these memories back to the forefront, right? For all of them, it seems like. And I like that. I thought that was a good move to do. And then we start to get right into the movie here. What is your thought, though? I want your thought. They kind of did a similar take on the whole first movie where one person witnesses a murder, gets blood all over them, and takes off because they're going to get blamed and gets thrown in jail. What did you think of that?
You know what? It felt like every time they were going to do something interesting, they just go right back to what they know. And I will say this about Chris's dream there, and I hate that they blew that in the trailer when all the kids like explode into ashes around her and stuff. Like, that was an awesome looking effect. I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that in the trailer because I knew that was coming. So when I saw her sitting in that class, I was like, oh, here it comes. And sure enough, there it was, and it looked great. It still works. I like her nightmare, and I like the fact that she gets killed like Tina. She basically levitates and just gets split, straight down the whole front. And this time we see it. And I'll say for a film that's got a lot of violence in it, that's a good gore effect. Like that, it didn't look cheesy at all. It looked good. And Thomas Decker, Jesse, I mean, the look on his face is like two things. It's like, holy shit, did that just happen to my girlfriend? Holy shit, I'm totally getting blamed for that. And he just takes off. But the thing is, though, and the thing with Rod is, like, we got, like, you know, time with him. Like, he ran away and he talked to a friend, and, like, he's still talking to somebody the next day. They catch this kid in, like, a matter of minutes. Yeah. And my wife had a great point. She's like, who called the cops? You know, so I guess the neighborhood watchman saw him running around at the middle of the night and was like, why is that teenage kid running out of the... We didn't even talk about, though, how Freddy, like, kills the dog. You know, I mean, you never do that, right? You never kill poor Rufus, and poor Rufus is dead. I was just petting him. Well, that sucks, man.
I was just petting him.
If I had any reason to hate you more, you know, now I really do, Freddy. But
yeah.
No, I did like Chris's death, and I like the fact that we got to get somebody in jail, and that the dude is doing everything he can to try to, you know, stay awake, and his, you know, tough ass cellmate is like telling him to shut up. And when he finally gets killed, and it is a good kill scene, probably the second best kill scene in the film. When he gets killed, and Freddy drops that line about, "Oh, your brain will last 7 more minutes after your heart stops. We got more time to play." Yeah. That was sick. But his cellmate is like, "I did not do this. Come and get me out of here." And I did think, well, that was a pleasing moment. Like, they're not wasting a lot of time getting into the killing here. And it set me up for a false thought for a minute. I was like, man, they're going to have a body count out the wazoo here. And then it stops. Like, so much so that we have to, like, kill somebody on the internet on a blog. You know, like, that's Aaron Hughes' whole performance is on a webcam. It's like he shot it in the back of his dorm one day or something. And I think that was only put in there because we need somebody else to die. We didn't anybody die in 35 minutes. And the movie does grind to a halt when Quentin and Nancy become Nancy Drew and one of the Hardy Boys. Like, it's yeah. But up to that point, like the first act of this film, I'm like, I am down for it. I'm like, man, this is fantastic. And I was the same way in theaters. I was like, this is awesome. This is exactly what it should be. And then it takes a weird, slow turn up the mountain, Brian, and I don't think it ever recovers.
Yeah, it gets out of the whole action sequence and goes into the let's figure out why this is happening time, right? And
which is what we need, but
we do, but we don't need to slow down to a bloody halt, which is what we do, right? And it's really bizarre. I really like if this movie were 4 separate movies, they'd all be pretty decent. Right?
Yeah, if they're all episodes of a show.
As one simple movie, it's like, this is so good. All of a sudden, it's like, what the fuck?
What is Gigablast? Does that
when
really
are we going to
exist?
kill someone? When are we going after? What, you know? And it was just like, oh god, we have to have mommy daughter talk, and
but we don't get enough of those. We don't get enough parent talk. The parents just popping in that again. I feel like Connie Britton and Clancy Brown are in like maybe, I don't know, 4 minutes of this whole film.
Oh, not very long, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, you've wasted 2 good character actors right there. I mean, they're both very good at playing different types of people, and they're just Clancy Brown gets one scene to really do what he's good at. Connie Britton gets nothing to do in this film.
Well,
nothing at all.
All she gets to do is to call up Quentin's dad to say, we need to intervene. They're starting to remember.
Like, even that scene at the dinner table or whatever, when she's looking at pictures and stuff, you know, like, they could have played that so much better. And I mean, if you've ever watched any of Friday Night Lights, Connie Britton on there is like the most realistic, you know, mom on TV that you've seen in years. And she has all the range of emotions with the teenage daughter on that show. And it's, I mean, and of course that's set up over seasons and seasons, but like, I feel none of that here. First off, these 2 people don't look like they come from each other. There's no way Rooney Mara came from her. It's like, no, you adopted her. Like, you're not this, you know, blood. Also, we don't get any story at all. Where's Dad? Dad died in the war. Dad run off. Dad, you know, where's the, and then where's Quentin's mom? Like, that was the thing in the first Nightmare
brother
film.
And sister?
That would even be weirder. Now, thank you. You just ruined the other thing in the film. They actually had some bit of cute chemistry together. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
Not anymore.
Oh, gosh. Well, she had more than Langenkamp and Johnny Depp did. But anyway, well, he didn't teach her Balinese Dream Warrior therapy or whatever. But the thing is, like, I don't get that these people have any relationship at all. Like, all she does is tell Nancy to go to bed and not drown in the tub. You know, listening to their headphones on a cell phone in the tub. I'm like, first off, nobody is dumb enough to get your phone that close to the tub. No, I'm sorry. I know people. They love the phone.
Are.
Oh, have you done this?
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, okay then. I apparently...
Call me a moron. Go ahead.
I don't trust my electronics that much. Maybe I don't trust myself around the electronics.
Your cell phone will not electrocute you, Jay. Don't worry.
No, but it'll kill the phone.
Well, yeah, it's possible. You believe it or not, these phones nowadays, if you got an iPhone or something, they can last underwater for quite some time before they'll actually die.
But that Samsung thing she was janking around with, no. Or that Nokia,
at least it didn't start on fire.
It did not. You're right. So, but still, I don't know. I'm not going to blame her for that. They had to recreate that scene. It's well enough.
Iconic. I mean,
well, it is, but again, I'm like, why do we feel like we got to do the greatest hits of things? Like, we get a part where she's walking through the
remake.
Well, but they call back to stuff that's like not even that good.
They got the body drag in the hall, man. That was good.
Well, yeah, but then they got Freddie doing cheesy lines like, how's that for a wet dream? And I'm like, really? We pull that one out? I was like, and plus, that's like Nancy. Like, that's a terrible... That's not a thing that she would know anything about unless she just studies boys, which she does not come off like somebody who cares. So I don't know. There are a couple of times when I feel like whatever script they were working off of had Freddie doing jokes, and they let Jackie Earle Haley do a couple of those, and they're like, maybe we shouldn't let him do these because he really can't do this. Like, I like the guy, and he's got a sense of humor. If you've ever seen the RoboCop remake, he's hilarious in that. And I'm like, if you'd have let the guy riff like that, that would have worked, but that would have totally been opposite the Freddy character. So why do it at all? We've made him so sinister and so strange and weird. Why even go there?
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. I think they should have kept the comedy piece out of it completely, because that's what really kind of made Freddy kind of not so scary anymore. And if you're going for a scarier Freddy, you don't introduce the comedy.
No, not at all. And
especially when he's a child molesting son of a bitch.
Yeah. The other thing, too, is as they're having Quentin and Nancy figure all this stuff out, Hardy, Nancy, Drew through this thing, as they do, they have some bit in there, Brian, about like the Pied Piper. And I'm like, what the hell are y'all
leading
talking
the
about?
Kids, yeah.
Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? And I felt like, I'm like, is this part of the script that wanted the kids to be liars about it? Because then this would have paid off. Otherwise, it just seems kind of stupid. I don't get why that's in there at all.
And I agree. I don't get why it's in there either. I thought that was really dumb. Like,
yeah, it doesn't need to be there. Like, it's another reason on top of another reason. Like, I get it. I get why the guy, like you said, he's a molesting son of a bitch. That's all I really need to know. I mean, I don't need him. He's been wronged by the town, so he goes after the children. I'm like, well, y'all aren't even going to pay that off. So that's a waste of time.
A big waste of time, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when you realize something, too, is that because they've cobbled together so many stories, somewhere along the way they realized, God, we got to slow this thing down. We don't have enough time. And they do. I mean, it comes to a grinding halt. It picks back up finally when they go to the drugstore, but the 30 minutes getting to that, I was just like checking the timer, looking at my watch. I was like trying, don't pick up the phone and play on Twitter. Don't pick up the phone and play. I mean, really, like I was bored for so much of this. And, our friend Nick, I was talking to him about this. He's been listening to the shows. And I said, hey, you got any thoughts on this? He said, yeah, utterly boring. And I don't think he's ever even seen the end of it. So maybe he has. But, this is the part that just, it does slow down way too much. And the problem is if they speed it up, the movie's an hour and 10 minutes long. So they had to do something, but it's sort of like the middle of H2O when everything just kind of stops. Everything just kind of stops.
Don't be ripping on H2O.
I'm not ripping it. I mean, it was fine. It was fine enough, but
it's great.
Well, you say that. It's nowhere near the 1978 version. But,
whatever.
And it's not. And look, say what you will about The Curse of Michael Myers, but it keeps you entertained. You never know what's coming. So. Anyway, not to rehash that conversation. We're doing now what the producers have done. We're just revisiting the greatest hits.
Damn straight.
But I mean, really, that's all they're doing, and they believe that Krueger wants revenge because they lied as children. So they do have the confrontation with the dad, and again, it's Clancy Brown's best scene. It's one of the few he actually gets, and I thought he was great in it. But again, they dropped that so quick because they just want to get out to the preschool now. So these kids kind of go on their own, and
so as we get here. This school obviously has been abandoned.
Right.
I guess we can assume that it was abandoned shortly after they murdered Fred Krueger there, right?
After they burned him alive and buried the evidence somehow.
It. It's there. It's in plain fucking sight.
Yeah, that's the amazing part, right? No cops have ever been through this place to clear it out.
They didn't bother. They didn't bother to go look at this thing to figure out why anyone would kill this guy. They just claim that he ran away, right?
Right.
And it's all right. They find it so easily.
Did they hypnotize the whole town? Did the whole freaking town get hypnotized and buy that bullshit line? He just went away. I mean,
I don't get it.
That's the thing is before you could buy that, right? Because you had a cop involved. Nancy's dad had the kind of pull that could make that work.
Correct.
Quentin's dad, is either the principal or the school counselor. I don't know who Gwen is. Nancy's mom, I don't know what she does. Chris's mom's a freaking Quentin's not Quentin's lover. Quentin's dad's lover.
Oh yeah,
but you know what? I mean, Chris's mom is a freaking flight attendant. Which is great, but that means she's gone a lot.
Yeah, she's got to take the red eye at 4 p.m.
I guess maybe she had to do prep. I don't know.
I guess that red eye.
I don't know, man. Look, that's a hard job. Blessed to anybody who can actually do it. But
I know. I just thought that was a great line.
Yeah, I did notice that.
I've got a red eye to London at 4 p.m.
That's called we're picking up a quick shot, and we can't get the light out of the shot. Who cares? And we're just gonna do it quick. This lady's got to go and do a soap commercial, so she can't be here tomorrow. We got to shoot it now.
Right.
That's what's happening.
Anyway, I mean, the fact that they go down into his lair, his room.
Well, hold on. Before we get to his room, though, we got to talk about the drugstore scene. Okay.
Okay.
Because it's completely edited wrong. It's a typical of this movie and everything that's wrong with it. You have Quentin go in and he talks to the druggist, right? And he's like, "I need to refill these," and they're like, "Oh no, that's a little bit inside of your window. We can't do that." And they obviously can see he's like tweaking back there, right? And they're like, "No, we're not giving this dude. We're not selling this dude Sudafed. No, nothing." And the thing is like his last moment is to walk away. But, there's, 3 extra beats of him going, "You just go ahead and fill that up. You just go ahead and fill it up. You just go ahead and fill it up." And I'm like, we didn't need all 3 of those. One time would have been good, and he just walks away. They just left that in there because at that moment, Nancy has tried to burn herself with a cigarette lighter, which I'm like, what kind of car still has those in them? Not that model car. I
haven't seen one in a long time.
I don't think you can anymore, actually. But beyond that, she's having this cool action scene with Freddy chasing her down the aisleway, like we've talked about already. Meanwhile, Quentin is standing there arguing with the druggist, which we already know the answer to this. It's so pointless. And again, it's another moment of when I realized these people had no idea what they were putting together doing, because this movie is paced so wrong. And this is everything wrong with the second act is this right now, because you've got this great thing going on the side over here, and meanwhile you got this dude schlubbing at the dang counter with Dr. What's-His-Face. So it's a complete waste.
Somebody's got a problem.
Clearly, I'm on my soapbox about this, okay? But
I meant Quentin, but
well,
you
clearly,
could too.
I mean, look, dude, he was popping those things like Tic Tacs. Anyway, so you got that cool scene going on, and you got Quentin there wasting everybody's time, and from there, though, we do get them going to the school, but they have this cute little conversation in the slow down drive in the car, because I guess we needed to establish that they were cute on each other some more than we already had. And they have this whole he does get a funny line. Quentin does is he was like, well, if I ask you out and you're not ready to decide, you can sleep on it. And then like Freddy appears somehow and runs them off the road, but he runs them right to like where they want to go. And I'm like, why would Freddy send them to where the evidence was? He was screwing with them to tell them that they
maybe
lied.
he wants them to know why he's after him.
Why? There's zero
games,
strategic
man.
advantage to that. No,
Head games.
The head game is to make them think they lied about it. They're already going down there. Like, he could be like, man, that's way better.
Maybe to make them lie about it is the head game for them. However, for him, he's sinister. He wants them to know.
Well, he lays it out to Nancy that he's trying to keep her so on the edge of insanity that once she finally goes to sleep, she'll never wake up again, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I get it. That's your favorite. You're going to extra good, with her or whatever. But it's sick. More than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the point.
But all of that stuff is at the freaking school. Can we just talk about the Freddy layer that is left behind for 20 years?
Not a single person has touched this stuff. All the old artwork and school pictures that the kids drew are still on the fucking wall. And the pictures are right there for anybody to see.
It's like they burned him last week or something. Like, really, it's not like 10 or 12 years or however long it's supposed to have been have gone by.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and at all. It doesn't make any sense. Like, again,
There's not even dust.
Somebody's mom or dad should have been a police officer, and we had to sneak into the archive section of the police station and look at all this. Gwen could have been a detective for all we knew. That would have been more interesting than sending the kids to the school.
Yeah.
Like, it's all about this school. It's all about the school. And
it's not very secured. Anyone can just come and go as they please. They didn't have to break in.
Oh, well, there is a fence.
Oh, wow. There's a fence at every school.
I know, right? But that's what I'm saying. I'm like, well, they had that, I guess. But here's the thing. None of they don't even know where the place is. The therapy was so good, they have no idea where the hell they even went to preschool. Brian, I haven't been in preschool in almost 35 years. I can drive you to it right now.
Exactly.
And I don't live in that town anymore, but I could take you tonight if you wanted to go. I could show you where it was.
Yeah.
And therapy or no, there's no way. Again, they only find it because Freddy leads them to it. That's the point. But the thing is that the first act was perfect, almost perfect. All right. The second act has been entirely too slow and meandering. Now the third act is incredibly truncated because it feels like two different endings shoved together somehow. And I want to get your reading on what is happening here, because what I want to ask is, does Nancy go into that coma state he wants her to go in? Is that how that ending with the mom happens, that she's still having the nightmare, or what the hell is that?
To me, it's just the fact that she's done. She's killed Freddy right off. And this is the, sorry, bitch, I'm still here, right? I mean, that's really it. They were setting up for a sequel that never, ever came and probably never, ever will.
I won't.
And it was just like, now she can rest easily. She goes to sleep and, oh, sorry.
Well, that's the thing, though. That's the thing, though. And again, I don't know if it's because she's bored and hates this movie, or she's trying to do something with the character there. But Rooney Mara never acts at ease. Like, for 1 minute, she acts like it's cool, because Quentin gets the crap torn out of him, man. I mean, he takes a beat. I really thought he was going to die. And the fact that he lived, it's amazing. I'm like, you get to live? Really? Okay. So Quentin lived. That was the first shock. The second thing was the way she kills Freddy is she does figure out to drag him into the real world. So they do this whole thing, and he stabs her with an epinephrine pen, whatever. We all saw that coming 100 miles away. Well, somebody else watched Pulp Fiction once, too. So, whatever. So we do that, and then she gets, like, the cutter thing that cuts, construction paper or whatever. Your wife's a teacher. I'm sure she's got one. You can cut the hell out of your fingers with one of those. I'm not sure you can decapitate somebody with one, but she sure as hell does.
It's got to be pretty well sharpened.
Yeah, just
because
a little
those
bit.
not really a sharp blade.
And yeah, and it's been sitting in that school. That dank. I mean, the school looks like it's in Gainesville, Florida.
It's in pristine condition, just like everything else.
Oh, it looks rusty, but it works like a friggin' machete. And also, I don't know if you've ever tried to like pick one of those things up. You can't just pick it up and rip it off. I mean, Billy Tybo would have trouble with that. I mean, if it's that fragile, it ain't gonna cut nothing. So again, the ending feels so truncated because they've got a cool thing going on when Freddy is screwing with her and puts her in the dress again and all that eerie shit. Like, that is messed up and good. I'm like, that you needed to do more of that. That is the psychological horror of all of this that you've tried to set up, but you don't want to do that. You want to just blast through this ending and get to the happy ending and jump scare at the end, and that's exactly what happens, which is ridiculous.
Very. It's beyond ridiculous. And you're right. This final scene could have been something much better than it was, but it was almost like, oh crap, we're getting close to the end of the film. We need to just wrap this up.
Yeah, it does come like all of a sudden, right? You feel that too?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like we're at the end and cut.
All right,
Rooney
so
says
what we're
she's
gonna
done.
do. You're going to cut the hand from the glove off. We're going to be all good here, and then you're going to slice his throat, and it's going to be done.
But don't forget, we got to reverse the bitch line because we've already had him do the bitch line. So we got to do the bitch line, and then she's got to do the "you're in my world now, bitch. It hurts, doesn't it, bitch?" And she, Rooney Mara is really like sinister and frightening in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Like, I feel like she could kick my ass. Not here. Not art student Nancy is not secretly doing Tybo on the side. Okay, like that is the wrong thing. And that's the other thing too. Like, at least with the other Nancy, we saw her like Ramboing up, right?
Right.
Like she was setting stuff on fire and getting ready to get. This girl like has a meet cute in a car with a dude, burns herself with a cigarette lighter, and all of a sudden she's friggin' Red Sonja out there with this paper cutter. And it's a dumb looking death. It sounds so weird. And then to get that ending where Connie Britton gets it through the back of the head and the eyes, it's just such a cheap 3D nothing jump scare. I mean, it's coming. Like the minute she stops in front of that mirror, I'm like, oh, he's coming out of the mirror. Boop, there he is. And it's so telegraphed.
Yeah, I thought that was dumb too. But again, I think that what they were trying to do is set up for a sequel that never came.
Yeah, they wanted somewhere else to go because goodness knows they had painted themselves in so many corners they think they'd never get out of again. I mean, where is there to pick up after this, Brian? That's the thing. Like, where would you go?
Where was there to pick up after the first Freddy Krueger in the first place? They found a way.
Yeah.
They could find a way here. I mean,
Dream Demon, I mean, all he did was disappear, and then he may have not even disappeared at the end, right? Like, there's plenty of places to go there. With this one, I'm like, please let the school burn down and that be the end of this.
Well,
like,
and that's the thing. Like, this is how he should die, is that he should be forced to be burned to death again, right?
Right.
That should be the end-all of Freddy Krueger, and we never really finally get that. And that is very disappointing to me because he's come back from every fucking thing that he's ever gone through, right? The only thing that would make sense for him to die permanently from would be to be burned to death a second time.
In all fairness, he didn't come back from the pipe bomb that Lisa Zane dropped on him in part 6. That was the end. So
whatever.
The spermatozoa flew away. So that was the end of that Freddy line.
So disappointing.
Well, but it's just like this one. It sets up a great idea and then it totally flubs it. Yeah. I mean, it's like Kiss Alive 3. Sounds like a good idea, but not really. So.
Yeah, that album sold pretty damn well.
Yeah, you know what? This movie made a lot of money.
I Want to Hear It Loud song. Oh my God. Did that get played over and over too much?
Yes, it did. But you know what? This movie made a lot of money too, and ain't nobody talking about it either, except us. So
good point.
It's a good comparison, I think, because there's nowhere left to pick up. We talked about it. Ron and I did a little bit on the Friday the 13th remake. Is that they left a place to go because a certain reading of that movie is that Jason wins and kills everybody. which is like, wow, we've never seen that. That would have been a cool, and they never pick up from it, and they're not going to if and when they ever get around to doing that new Friday the 13th and stuff. Which I think it's been pushed back again.
Of course.
And they could have picked up with this one where they picked up with the last ones too. Freddy's still running around out there. It's a new set of people. Maybe Nancy comes back, maybe not. Probably not Rooney Mara, maybe Quentin. But they did what they felt like was a greatest hits of Freddy stuff here, and just mashed it all together and tried to sell it. And it sold
tried
for
to
a
make
weekend,
it a little more sinister and a little more dark than they did before.
Which is not a bad idea, by the way.
No, I think that's the way you should have gone, right?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to do that. The problem is in the way it's executed.
Right.
That's. I think we're at the point now where it's time to get final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So before we go any further, what are yours for A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 remake?
Well, sadly, this is going to have to be a small popcorn. So much promise, Jay, like we've said, so much promise at the beginning that this was going to be awesome. I like the Freddy Krueger look, the remake look. It looks much more like someone who got burned beyond recognition. I like the idea of actually delving into the story behind Freddy Krueger being that child molester and the sinisterness of it. But after that first great act of all action, it just dies, and it dies horribly. There's some good knowledge given to us in those scenes, but it just is, you have to like beat a dead horse to get it out of it. And to me, that ruins a lot of this movie. The potential that it had was huge, and it just severely falls as a disappointment. So for me, it's a small popcorn.
I'm going to join you in that small popcorn for almost all of the same reasons, and I'll just sum it up in saying that this had such potential, so many places that could have gone, and had some of the right inclinations, and then they just blew it. They blow the whole Roman candle in the first act, and after the first 25 minutes, this movie is boring and tedious, and ultimately as useless as Freddy's Dead was to the series. Like, you and I are a little bit unique in the fact that we both more or less gave a pass to parts 4 and 5. People hate those movies, especially part 5. Like, nobody, I've never met anybody else except us that like part 5. Most people will, you can kind of go back and forth on part 4. Everybody loves 3, but we kind of got into it because at least there was something there, and it was fun to watch. This at no time was fun to watch except for the first 25 minutes of it, and then after that, boom, gone. And for me, I'll be honest with you, when Katie Cassidy died, I was just kind of done. Like, Kyle Gallner's fine as Quentin. He plays a good strung out guy. I don't know if he ever has been in his real life or not, but he apparently figured that part out really well. But everybody else in this movie either looks bored or is completely wasted and not used right. And there's a reason that Samuel Bayer is great at music videos, and go check out his videography, people. You've seen a lot of his music videos. You like them. And he's made one film, this one, because I don't think he knows how to tell a long-form narrative. I don't think he could put it together. I imagine they probably got him cheap, and the studio cobbled this thing together, and it was just this mess in the end. And in the end, it's just not worth it. So small popcorn for me. Real disappointed, too, because that's the difference in this one and the Friday the 13th. The Friday the 13th remake, Ron and I both gave a medium, too, and said it's no worse than any of the middling sequels that Jason's had. It was fine. I mean, when I first saw it, I hated that movie. All right, and then I've grown to kind of appreciate it for what it is. This movie has always disappointed me, and I don't know why. I need therapy because I keep going back watching it, expecting it to get better, and it's never going to. I don't know why I keep doing that to myself.
Torture.
But I guess so, man. It's this show. It makes us do that. It makes us go back to this stuff that I want it to be
relive those
good.
leprechauns.
I don't know that I can ever. Well, I'll take that back. I rewatched Leprechaun in Vegas recently because it was on somewhere, and I just sort of sat there and laughed. So, because it at least is fun. This movie's not fun at all. So, Leprechaun Origins now, you could not for all the gold and avarice, my friend. So, no way.
I bought that damn thing too.
I am sorry you own that. I hope at least it's digital, because if it's a disc, you should be destroying it soon. But if it's digital, you could just delete it.
Pretty sure it's digital.
Yeah. So either way, that wraps up the Nightmare on Elm Street. We got one more. We're kind of going back in time. We're doing something a little different. We always do these things in order, but we decided, let's do the team up at the beginning, the last house on the left, which I don't know why I made you guys do that anymore.
Me
but
neither.
We did it.
Ugh.
Yeah, we did that. Well, it was Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham. We're coming back for their other team up, Freddy versus Jason, which is this huge, massive hit, but the question is it good? Does it work? And the ultimate question I have about it is this a Jason movie with Freddy in it, or is it a Freddy movie with Jason in it? We'll talk about that more next time. That's going to be a fun conversation, I think, along the way. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on Freddy versus Jason, because it's been a few years since I watched it myself.
As someone who's never seen any of the Friday the 13th, it should be interesting.
I will tell you now, you probably should watch like part 4, and I think you kind of got everything you need to know. So, or just listen to our reviews of them. Either way,
Duly noted.
So that will be there for you either way. But that one's coming up, of course, and then we'll be done with the biggest Shocktober we've ever done, Brian. The dueling series, if you will. I really can't believe we've actually made it past all of this.
We did it.
But yeah, somehow we've gotten through all of this. But either way, it's been enjoyable to talk about with you if the film wasn't all that good that we got to meander over this time. So, folks, thanks again for joining us on this episode of Film Strip. You can find all of our back catalog on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies, and you can go and find links to our social media there. Leave us a review on iTunes. It helps other people find the show. We really appreciate the support. Until next time, for Brian, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Film Strip.